carry a song of joy in your heart, and may we all be one. Thank you, and good night.
That was sort of the beginning of the training period, as I mentioned, of entering into Project Moonshadow, but really even before that, I was entered into the program before birth. Those who went into the program were actually genetically engineered from the ground up. So, you know, we were sort of planned out before we were actually born, if that makes any sense, so that by the time, you know, we were a biological bunch of cells, it was a genetically engineered and altered biological bunch of cells that was geared to hold different energy, different consciousness, different soul energy, so that you had a superior human being, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, but metaphysically, spiritually, if that makes any sense. And then take those 300 people, and I would say sort of the earliest training periods that would be considered conditioning. That was before age 4, but really Project Moonshadow, like the physical training that happened at like age 4. So age 4 is really the start of physical training. Physical training at age 4 was really going to locations where, you know, you're in groups with the other kids, mostly games and exercises designed to teach everybody, you know, sort of how to function as a group and how to, you know, cooperate and do certain basic skills and functions that will apply later on to battlefield functions as you get older. So that was pretty interesting. And most of those memories are pretty sharp. You know, it's not like a really fuzzy thing at all. And it was not a stressful kind of thing. Like I said, they kept it really, you know, like it was games and fun time for the kids, and it wasn't really like stressful, or we didn't have guns at that age or weren't worried about things chasing us down, trying to eat us at that age. And just under sort of the general supervision of a military officer and an extraterrestrial manager of some kind they were sort of the scientist engineers who had done the engineering, and there was always someone present to make sure that, I don't know, you know, the genetic engineering was working properly, and if there were any glitches, they would notice before we would notice, you know, if there was some physiological, mental, emotional, or energetic kick or something that let them know that something was wrong. But they're pretty brilliant genetic engineers. I don't think there were too many problems. At
around the age of 6, they started introducing some standardized type testing in the elementary school I was going to. The standardized testing, you know, was your normal standardized testing to make sure, you know, children were learning certain subject matter at a certain age. But it was also designed to weed out and identify individuals as anomalies to be followed up on by people coming out and doing other tests. And that's what occurred with me. I popped up as an anomaly somehow. They came out and did one-on-one testing with me. Everything from, you know, written tests, you know, Rorschach kind of tests, tests actually asking me to guess what were on cards, you know, squiggly lines, stars, those kind of weird little tests. And then they asked the school, through the school, they asked my parents' permission for me to go into this program where I was going to be taken off campus on occasion, taken for field trips and extracurricular kind of things. And that's how it was supposed to begin. And the vans would come and pick me and other children up, and they were taking us to places like Carswell Air Force Base and places like, not really malls, but commercial real estate that was closed down or in transition. They would take us there to do, training or different types of operations when, we were children.
It's family genetics. I mean, I can say that somehow the process of who my parents are related from, who they came from, is really more what that's about. And so somehow the line of genetics that end up with them have what some percentage of traits that are more of the traits that they want than someone else's pool. So of all the different genetic samples that they could get, somehow the genetic lines going into my parents were higher value traits for whatever they wanted me to be than somebody else. My parents were straight-laced teetotalers, didn't drink. Yeah, clean living folks. It gets a little weird, but these beings also have a certain ability to see back and forward through time. So for them to sort of plan a genetic structure for someone and plan making someone, they kind of have the ability to see how that develops in the future as they're doing the engineering. So there's a certain amount of, as they're working on the engineering, doing the process, they kind of know what's going to happen in the future or what's likely to happen in the future. So there's this level of planning that is difficult for people like us who live in moment-by-moment temporal planning, to think about planning something as you're doing it and being able to see the results in the future as you're sort of doing it.
Well, and it dwindled down. In the beginning, there was, I don't know the exact number, it was, around 100 in my area that was in my age group. And as people, as they either washed out or, they didn't make the grade or, were rejected for whatever reason, or as people were identified for different abilities and qualities were identified in them, they were brought off into slightly different programs, and so the group started getting smaller and segmented. Yeah, by the time I had graduated high school, there was only one other kid in the area that I occasionally saw, and at that point he was then going to a different high school. I transferred around the area quite a bit, so I went to a number of junior highs and high schools in the area. But I ended up graduating from Richardson High School.
Essentially what they're able to do, and I understand there's a chronological change of technological ability. So you're talking about the early 70s, in which probably there was some use of wormhole technology, but mostly at that stage, before they were using jump gates, they were actually using delta wave emitters over the entire neighborhood, so everyone's asleep. So like literally they can send someone up your front step who can walk in your front door, go into your bedroom, a couple of technicians who can lift you up out of bed, carry you out to a van, and then take kids in the neighborhood. They cluster people too. So the neighborhood that I grew up in was a cluster. So there were a lot of kids who were in program in that neighborhood. Most of them had no idea. And upon reflection, as I used to think, God, we had a lot of weird kids that were into throwing stars when I was a kid. But it was not so much, just kids into throwing stars. I had a lot of weird, genetically altered super soldier kids in my neighborhood. And a lot of it had to do with the position of the neighborhood, which was right on the outskirts of town. So essentially they could pick everybody up, drive them less than a half a mile or a mile away to a TR-3B that would pick everybody up and then take everybody off. And then because they're able to use a certain amount of temporal, time-space travel so that the ship can take off, and then Time Corps can, plan the return trip. So it doesn't matter how many hours or days we're gone, the ship can return 15 minutes after we left, and they can return everybody to their beds before anybody wakes up. And that's like early 70s. Probably by about 1975, jump gate technology was pretty regular. So instead of having to have a technician come in, they were able to project the jump gate right into your bedroom, and a little door would open up in the wall, and a couple technicians would come through. And they're able to stimulate your brain in such a way you wake up, but you're not like, what, like you just kind of, time to go. And then you just go through the, jump gate and go to whatever school/training session for however many hours, days, whatever that you're doing. And some of them must take place in places where they have the ability to sort of keep you from either progressing in age, or they have some ability to manage to keep you from aging cellularly, physically every time, because otherwise you would age up faster. If you calculate the entire amount of training period by the time that I was 17 years old, it's something like 12 and a half years. So time quantum dilation means that actually when I was 17, I was like almost 29, right? Which is, I know, weird when people think about that. But
at the 17-year-old mark, when I was returned, after that point, I was mainly, they were mainly observing me and then pulling me in on very rare occasions for certain things that were needed, but I was out at that point. Yeah, my friends were the ones really making the comments. You know, they didn't understand why I was never at school and why, you know, I was, you know, I wasn't making the best grades, but, you know, I was continuing to be, I guess, socially promoted to the next grade, you know, but, you know, I was never at school. And, you know, you know, kids were asking me, you know, what's going on? When I'd go to a different junior high, we'd transfer to a different junior high, you know, they would have to end up setting that up for me, setting up the situation. So sometimes I would be in like a STAR kind of program to where the teachers were talking above my head in the curriculum. And then I'd go to another one and they wouldn't know what to do with me. And they would stick me in a class to where like kids were sitting there doing doodles on paper all day. It was just very disjointed. And, you know, the school system, I don't think really knew what to do with me a lot. They had fronts going on, but I mean, there on some levels, there had to be, you know, someone always has to know in an organization. There always has to be somebody that knows in an organization that's working with intelligence groups.
Because of the training period, they're able to cram like an extra 12 years of training within a 17-year period. So there's no way that they could have done that without some age stalling, you know, whether I'm not saying age reversing even, if they're somehow able to retard the process while you're in these training sessions, some field or something that keeps your cells from aging while you're training or while you're in these areas, in these zones. Otherwise, you'd look older, and we did. But I felt older. I certainly had the chronological and mental and emotional experience of feeling older. But, well, it was more of a notion that whatever you do remember, you don't want to talk about. And whatever you do remember, you classify or quantify as a dream experience. Usually, you usually go, oh, yeah, I have the most vivid dreams. You know, you kind of would say to yourself or to other people, and you might think, oh, I had the most vivid dream last night. Let me describe it to you. And so if there was ever conversation, it was always in that context. It was never like, oh, by the way, when the military man came and took me away last night, here's what happened, because that's a quick, like, trip to the crazy house or to the, you know, the head shrinker doctor. And so then I can even say the first time I said something to my parents at a young enough age that was about like things that I was waking up and remembering that troubled them. And I recognized, you know, could tell that their facial expression and their posture and so forth, they were troubled by hearing what I was saying. I didn't want to talk about that anymore. It was like, oh, don't bring up that stuff to mom and dad. They worry about that. We don't want to worry mom and dad. Don't tell them.
Yeah, there's a major negotiation going on right now between these, what we loosely call the cabal groups, but they're these Earth government syndicates that have been running the Western, well, I guess everything, you know, the military-industrial complex, the finances, everything. For some time, and have had this 100-year Federal Reserve thing going. Well, you know, this group is finally losing their grasp on power, and these Earth Alliance groups that are called by all these different names are now negotiating from a place of power. And what's being decided is exactly how much information is going to be disclosed. You know, making little comments about ETs. This is all little drips of this partial disclosure that they're giving us. And we're hearing more and more that the Alliance is beginning to believe that a partial disclosure is not going to be possible. There's too much out there. Once people get a little bit of the information and they see the rest of the information, there's just going to be too many questions.